Thanks. I hated to interrupt the great buzz in the room, but let's go to work. We've all got a lot of things to get done today, and this is part of it. And this is the Transportation Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Council convening this 20th day of November. It is about 12:35 p.m. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. And is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Anderson.
Woodchill. I got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The agenda is published as adopted. Do we have anyone from the general public that wishes to address the tab on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing of any kind? Okay. All right. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to reports portion of the agenda. The chair reports out first, and we didn't have an exec committee meeting this week, this month, but I will tell you that we are going to need to repopulate the TAB executive committee. So we need to have folks step up and volunteer to serve in 2025. If you're interested, send an email to Elaine. We're going to want to try to take care of this at the December meeting if possible. And the TAB will vote on it at the January meeting. And we need, Elaine will delineate the categories of membership for the executive committee, but it's county, city, cities are first class, Minneapolis or St. Paul. We need modal reps, citizen reps, and you'll see it all in Elaine's email. And so now, where's Sheila? Right over there. Connie couldn't be with us today, but Sheila Kalpe is here from MnDOT, and we'll look forward to your report. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you, Chair.
Kalpe.
Members, yes, I'm Sheila Kalpe from MnDOT. It's snow and ice season, right? Yay.
Yay. Welcome back.
Yeah, no doubt. Anyway, just a friendly reminder, if you're traveling on the roadways or around the network, 511 is a great resource to figure out what roads and what those travel conditions might be like for your loved ones or yourself as you're traveling around. Many features on there if you kind of poke around at that too, but an important resource at this time of the year, most definitely. We continue to have safety issues amongst all modes on our roadways. As of the 19th of November, we've had 409 fatalities. That number is huge. As we start looking and breaking that down over what it had been last year at this time, which is 402. We've had 39 pedestrian fatalities, 6 bike crashes that resulted in fatalities. Motorcycle crashes are exponentially higher, 18% of the overall crashes. That was 74 fatalities this year. ATVs and side-by-sides, a new mode of travel by some people in rural Minnesota, but that's 7% of the crashes too. Again, it's important to think about that as we're traveling on the roads. Roads get slippery at this time of the year, whether you're a non-motorized user or someone driving a vehicle, to make sure that you're thinking about taking extra time as you're close to someone. Again, we appreciate the work that Met Council has undertaken with the Regional Safety Plan, Action Plan, and we're looking forward to partnering with them on that work as well. Recently, we had a TZD conference where we also talked about, again, the overall crash numbers and things that we can kind of help all work together to make sure it's a safe mode for everyone traveling on the roadways. We also talked a little bit about AI technology, which was pretty neat to hear about as well, and uses of that. So again, looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
All right, good. Thanks for that. I forgot one thing I was going to do at the beginning of the meeting, and that is to introduce Victor Lake, who is joining us from the Prior Lake City Council, and replacing Kevin Burkhart. And Victor, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Victor Lake, and I'm on the Prairie Lake City Council, so I'm just getting my feet wet here, and
Good. Welcome.
in here for Kevin Burkhardt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Todd Bewin is with us from MPCA today, and always good to have him here with us.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. The only thing I'm going to talk about is just a little bit about climate grants. We continue to offer grants, and the interest in these grants continues to be greater than what we have money for. So that's a good sign. This time we are talking about grants to help communities prepare for climate change impacts and then taking climate actions. We have requests for proposal currently open for resilience planning grants, for implementation grants, for actually doing the work on the ground, and for local climate action. And there's plenty of information on our website. I'm going to provide the link and the information to Elaine, and so she can provide that out to the group. But that's really all I have. Other than that, I'm kind of a short timer. So depending on whether Frank sends me over, the next couple of months, that could be the end of it for me. But I'm planning to retire. January will be my last meeting, so.
Oh, wow.
Well, great, congratulations.
Be a lot of work. Wait a minute.
Coming up on
anything to say
37
about
years
that.
with the Minnesota Pollution Control.
Only 37.
Hard to believe.
Back, girl.
Give me a call.
for you.
I'm interested in doing other things, so keep me in mind.
Citizen rep spot.
There you go.
I have to fill out my
love it.
schedule.
Yeah, well, George Schember can give you some good ideas on what to do with your time if you're,
Bike across the country. Buy a bike, yeah.
if you're interested in riding your bike across America. A couple of times.
I'll hook my trailer to your.
Carl Crimmins is still in a situation where his health has not recovered sufficiently to be with us. I think we're hoping for January. But Bridget Reef is here from the MAC, and we'll look forward to Bridget's report on what's happening at the airport. Bridget, welcome.
Well, how is
Thank you,
Carl?
Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Bridget Reef, I'm Vice President for Planning and Development
Might need to be a little bit closer for the
so
mic,
saying
to the
with
microphones.
mics, yeah.
with the Airports Commission. Is that better?
Yeah, I think it helps a little bit. Pull that one up. Yeah, there you
How's
go.
that? A little better? I have just a couple of things. We are officially kicking off the holiday season at the airport. We're anticipating a good 10 days or so of elevated activity for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. You can anticipate that, as usual, Wednesday, the 27th, and Sunday, December 1st, are by far going to be the busiest days. We're anticipating with TSA over 50,000 passengers on each of those days. For reference, when we hosted the Super Bowl on the day after, when everybody leaves town, we hit our peak of 62,000. So we're going to be in those elevated passenger levels, so provide extra time if you're traveling. But to brighten that experience for folks, we are going to kick off a series of surprise and delight events. I don't know if you've ever experienced one of those, but we do things like donut giveaways, and we coordinate with the Minnesota Zoo and bring animals in, and some of those kind of fun things for the kids. We work with our strategy and stakeholder engagement folks to provide some of those fun little things to help ease the journey. We also work with our Airport Foundation. They increase the number of performances that we have in our terminals when it gets busy on these holidays, and I believe Ballet Minnesota is going to be there this Sunday. Pretty fun stuff coming up for that. Our capital improvement process is well underway. So the way we do our budgeting is completely different from how you all do it here. We're a very different animal, but our CIP, our capital program, does come to this group. You'll see it in December. And we are off and running with another big year planned for next year. We're at higher than $500 million in projects planned for the second year in a row. We also held our second annual construction progress preview meeting, where we invite contractors to come in, so prime contractors, subs, TGB, DBE, disadvantaged businesses to come in and hear about what projects we're doing, what we have coming up, so they can prepare and plan on what projects they want to bid on. It's part of our contractor outreach. We had more than 180 people participate in person and virtually this time around. So that helps us out quite a bit. We like to expand, we're a tough site to work on for contractors. We have tough hours, we have tough security restrictions and some of those, and so the more we can broaden the interest in working on our stuff, the better. Accessibility for anyone who's interested. So we have a program at the airport with a company called IRA. And if you're seeing impaired, you can utilize your phone, or you can pick up a set of glasses that have a camera in them. You can pick up the phone and call a representative from IRA, and they will walk with you through the terminal and help you navigate the facility. When we have had this in the terminals for years, but it's only been from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and now we're expanding that through a partnership to 24 hours a day. So we wanted to make note of that today. And then lastly, working with our MnDOT partners to enhance our cell phone parking lot signage. We've done some work to improve our cell phone lots, but nobody knows where they are. So we're working on some enhanced signage to help that out. That's not going to happen probably till next spring, but folks can keep an eye out for that. And otherwise, safe travels over the holidays.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. Any questions for Bridget?
Do we have an update on Carl?
Yes, Commissioner.
Do we have an update on Carl?
What, update on Carl?
Mr.
What you
Chair
can share?
and members, honestly, I don't know any more than you do. We're anticipating to see him back in January. He has been participating in our meetings remotely, listening in.
Okay.
So he's paying attention to what's going on, but he's just not with us physically yet.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Hey, Bridget, are those performances on the air side? So basically for travelers, passengers?
Mr. Chair, members, yes, they're in the terminals. They're usually in our rotunda spaces more often than not. So we'll have singers, we've had dancers, and then
They have dogs.
I'll just.
Have you smelled?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an agenda out there, I can find it for you, but our Airport Foundation does an amazing job to help with, again, just having something a little extra for folks when because traveling's hard. Travel days are always hard.
Good. Thanks. Anything further, Member Marest? No?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, good. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming over today. Deb Barber, Met Council report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things today. First is the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administrations conducted a planning certification review Wednesday and Thursday of last week. It's called a TMA certification review. This is required of all MPOs with a population greater than 200,000 every 4 years. During the review, the federal agencies examine our transportation planning processes and ensure we are adhering to federal requirements. All aspects of transportation planning process are examined. Federal partners may issue a recommendation areas that the MPO could consider altering or improving upon, a commendation where the MPO is performing exceptional work that is often considered a best practice nationally, a corrective action which areas in which the MPO are not meeting minimum federal requirements and must make immediate changes. The preliminary findings is that there were no corrective actions, and 8 areas of work received potential commendations, including many items familiar with TAB. The TIP online interactive map, the establishment of a TDM program and hiring of a program manager, our work with tribal officials and the hiring of a tribal liaison, the Council's Title II online submittal and LEP call system, which has 6 different language options, our equity-related planning and outreach efforts, including the equity heat maps included in the 2050 TPP, and the work performed by the Equity Policy Group, our congestion management process activities, our strong partnership with MnDOT, and the financial plan within the TPP. Among the 5 potential recommendations is the need to formally approve a metropolitan planning area boundary. This boundary is set to the smooth urban area boundary that was approved by the Council in September of 2023 and recommended by TAB. By state law, the council must include all 7 counties in its MPO planning area body. The MPA must include at least all urban areas identified by the U.S. Census Bureau and smooth urban area boundaries. The MPA boundary thus includes the 7-county area plus the urbanized areas of Wright and Sherburne County. The council will actually adopt this on December 11th because the areas have either been recommended by TAB, the urban area, or required by state law, the planning area. The council will take quick action to adopt the map so it can be complete when the federal agencies prepare their certification report in 2025. And we will share this information with TAC and all its subcommittees. But I do really want to commend our planning organization, part of it, for getting so many great commendations and having a very successful certification review. The only other thing I wanted to mention is we are entering the season of TAB vacancies. So we've got 4 citizen reps that will be up, which is citizen districts E, F, G, and H. And we're asking the applications be submitted by 12/13. If anyone, for those reapplying, get information in. Same thing for alternates. If there are open seats, if you know people who are interested, please let them know, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Member Barber with regard to her report? Yes, Member Foster.
I guess this is less of a question and more just of a celebration. I read that Metro Transit fares will be reduced to $2 on January 1st for regular service bus and BRT and light rail. And I am really glad that that is happening. So well done.
Thank you. And for those who don't understand what it is really, it's almost more of a fare simplification.
Yeah.
A lot of our fare structure previously used to be based off of AM, PM peaks, which we don't have AM, PM peaks. We're having, more of a late morning going much into a later time. And so to make it simpler for all of the riding public, we thought this was a good thing to do and to hopefully encourage more people to get on the transit system. Coincides a lot with the implementation of Network Now, which expands the transit service by 35%. And so between the increased ridership, we feel that, and reserves that we have, we're comfortable with the cost of it, but I think it's a big asset to our transit public. So thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else for Member Barber? All right, Suburban Transit Authority report out from Member Gary Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth Metrolink are proceeding with their joint transit study to improve service connections in the Northwest Metro. Minnesota Valley Transit Authority is one of 5 agencies selected by the Federal Transit Administration to participate in its Environmental and Sustainability Management System Training and Technical Assistance Program. So MVTA will benefit from virtual training workshops, on-site technical support visits, and access to forms and templates and expert consultation to help develop the program at the Egan Bus Garage. So we're looking forward to that. MVTA has received delivery of 5 eJust electric buses to help meet growing demand for Connect microtransit service. These are MVTA's first electric buses to go into regular service, which is expected to start next month. And Southwest Transit reported that ridership is up 25% overall from last year, driven by special events service. Southwest Autonomous Vehicle Service is expected to launch within a few weeks. They had a successful demonstration event a couple of weeks ago. Some of us were there. Member Barber spoke. Thank you for that. Mayor Winchell was there. And we got to ride in an autonomous vehicle, although an operator was sitting in the driver's seat but didn't touch the steering wheel or the pedals. So just explaining how it operates. So that's my
Good.
report.
Questions for Member Hansen at all, based on his report? Yes.
Thank you,
Member
Mr.
Barber.
Chair. Just to follow on to that, it was a great event at Southwest Transit. We had a lot of conversation about these first-time projects in the region. It's so great to provide information that will help all of the different transit agencies. And I want to just relate to you guys. They were also very appreciative because it's part of a mobility hub regional solicitation award that program is part of it. And they were also very thankful to our MTS staff who is managing the grant writing. So it's a great example of how when you need to pull the right people together to get something done, we kind of did that. And so it was really nice events and really nice to be part of it.
Thank you, Member Barber. All right, Chair Hager, anything to report out from a tax standpoint?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Just real quick, I'll let you know that in December, the TAC will be voting on the nomination of a new TAC chair. So per our bylaws, the role does rotate every 2 years. So we have an informal rotation where after cities, it will go back to a county rep and then an agency rep from there. So you'll see someone new starting in January.
I had a note on that. Thank you for your great service as tax chair over the last 2 years. Just having you to work with.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to your successor. I thought of one other thing I could report out on. I was on a call yesterday with Charlie Zelli, all the West Suburban mayors on Southwest LRT progress, and we'll have a regular quarter management committee meeting next week. But just to report out that there's been $3.1 billion worth of investment, economic development investment along the line, 9,400 apartment units along Southwest LRT line already, with another $750 million worth of projects underway that are going to create another 7,000 multifamily units along the line. The line cost looks like now it's shaken out at about $2.6 billion. The people at the management office for Southwest LRT seem pretty firm in their belief, along with Federal Highway Transit, that it would settle in at $2.6 billion. $2.6 billion. So the economic development part of it has outstripped the cost of it, which is good, I think. But those are just a few key data points that that Chair Zelli had for us at that meeting yesterday. I thought you might all enjoy hearing that. Yes, Chair Barber.
Mr. Chair, to clarify the budget, the final budget number for including all contingencies, everything all included that we'll be voting on at Transportation Committee next week is actually 2.86 billion.
All right.
Which is the same number we've been reporting for.
Already changed. Or my memory is faulty.
Have they set opening yet?
Yeah, 2027.
That's double. Okay.
Sometime in 2027, not 2028 as was originally projected. They're 85% complete. And all the work that's being done now, I think Chair Barber could verify this, but it's primarily in Minneapolis. Everything else is done.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would agree, especially for civil construction. So the other part is systems construction, which is the electrical. So that isn't quite as far along. It is on the west end, kind of where we live. It's by and large complete. But you'll see there's also, even once that's done, there's a period of time that testing has to be done. And we can't really test even the west end until the tunnel is fully done because we can't get trains out there. So that's sort of where we're at with some of that.
You know, when you think about 9,400 apartment units occupied and 7,400 more coming, and we've been part of a group of cities working on, with the legislators on housing affordability and housing production. And the Builders Association, Housing First, had an interesting data point when we met earlier this week. What do you think the average age now is for the first-time home buyer? Think of when all of you bought your house, first house. Well, how old you were? 38.
38?
38 is the new average age for the first-time home buyer in the United States. So apartment is indeed a new place to call home, not just a single-family home, as people work to try to figure out how they're going to afford to be able to live in a house. Okay, that's it for me. We've got minutes of October 16th, 2024. Any changes or corrections, additions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 16th?
Second.
All right, we've got Anderson moving, Commissioner Gattel seconding the adoption of the minutes of October 16, 2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the minutes as published for October 16, 2024, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we're on to the consent agenda. We've got a few items there to deal with on that portion of the agenda. And Chair Hager is coming back up to guide us through those two streamlined tip amendments. Chair Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two streamlined tip amendments. 2024-46 is for a total of 6 projects that were recently selected with the 2024 regional solicitation. So this is to amend these projects into the 2025 to 2028 tip. And this is really about process and timing, because these projects are utilizing some earlier funds, some 2025 and 2026 funds. So these project sponsors need to get their project in the tip so they can advance their projects and deliver on time. And the rest of the projects from the solicitation will be introduced into the next version of the tip. So TAC does unanimously recommend approval of this streamlined tip amendment. Would you like me to go to 47?
Yeah, why don't you cover them both, and then we'll come back.
All right, and then 2024-47 is another streamlined tip amendment for a Rest in Red study pilot. So the amendment is for a professional services contract that's funded by both MnDOT and Ramsey County to evaluate Rest in Red programming of traffic signals. This needs to be reflected in the tip because MnDOT will be using some federal HSIP funding for their portion of the costs, and these are not part of the HSIP funds that we solicit local agencies for projects. These are MnDOT-specific funds. And just a brief overview, Rest in Red is a traffic safety technology that encourages safer speeds. So traffic signals with Rest in Red technology can display red lights in all directions during late night and early morning hours when traffic volumes are lower. And so when a person driving a vehicle approaches these signals, and the intersection that is in Rest in Red phase, there's detection of that vehicle and the signal will turn green when it's beneficial at the posted speed limit. So TAC does unanimously recommend approval of this tip amendment as well.
Okay, good. Questions for Chair Hager? Excuse me, Chair Hager on 2024-46 or 47? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So the sensing technology presumably would also sense a person on a bike?
Mr. Chair, Member Martinson, I am not able to answer that detailed question, but I think we could get back to you on that.
No. Great question, though, Member Martinson.
Yeah.
All right.
I've sat at red lights too long. I know there's also an allowance in the state law that allows a bike to move on a red light after it goes through a whole cycle. But, you know, when it's 15 degrees out, I don't want to sit there any longer than I have to. Thanks.
All right. Yes, Member Foster.
Just a quick share for everybody, but specifically Mr. Martinson. Albuquerque and Portland have this technology now and have piloted it. So there's quite a bit of stuff online about how they've used it. Doesn't mean that's what St. Paul will test, but there is awareness of cyclists, although I honestly think it's pushing the button at the intersection type sensing, but you can check into it online.
Thanks, Member Jenkins. All right. Does someone care to move the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to approve 2024-46 and 47 in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. 2024, 46, and 47 are approved. And now we'll go to the only non-consent item we have on the agenda, and that is 2024-48. Chair Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is another TIP amendment, but this is non-consent because this is for a regionally significant project, which is the I-494 Easy Pass Extension and Related Improvements Project. The good news and congratulations go to MnDOT and the Met Council for successfully being granted an infra grant award of just over $138 million. This is a funding program for nationally significant multimodal freight and highway projects. This funding will allow for the construction of the full vision for the I-494 project in the Richfield and Bloomington area. The recommended motion is as follows: that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend adoption of an amendment to the 2025 to 2028 TIP to add a regionally significant project to extend Easy Pass, reconstruct mainline pavement, improve drainage, rehabilitate bridges, and add ADA improvements on 494 from Penn Avenue to 34th Avenue, on 494 from US 169 to Minnesota 100, and on I-35W from 86th to 76th Street for the purpose of release for public comment. There is a map in your packet. It does a really, really great job of showing the extent of the current construction project in yellow, and that work is funded with Corridors of Commerce funding. And then the added scope that we get with this additional money through the infra grant, which is shown in blue. And with that, Mr. Chair, TAC does unanimously recommend approval of this item.
Questions for Chair Hager on 48?
Mr. Chair, I'll move it.
All right. Second. Commissioner, we got a motion and a second to move 2024-48 for approval. Any further discussion? All those in favor of it?
Barbara has a question.
Somebody had a question or a comment?
Yes, a comment. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and we're very, very thankful to have this coming in. For those of you who have to travel along the 494 corridor, you know that construction on First Street is underway. I'm still going to say that MnDOT's handling it very well. So I will be in their corner on this one so far. I think what this does is that project, because it wasn't fully funded, would have been broken into many different phases. Now it's going to be broken into a couple. It's really going to make this much more seamless and really, you know, that corridor distinctly needed this improvement. This improvement includes min-pass lanes or easy pass lanes, which is really important because really no transit is currently in the 494 corridor other than some microtransit being provided by Southwest Transit, but because it's so congested. So this is really, really a big deal. Not only is it going to provide additional capacity, but it's going to add that easy pass and transit element. So very, very excited to see this.
All right, very good. All right, we've got a motion and a second on 2024-48. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of 2024-48 as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 2024-48 is adopted. Very good. That completes the business portion of the agenda. Now we're going to go to the information portion of the agenda. And I'll give a quick update on the work that the policymaker work group has been doing. And then make sure that all of you have in your calendars this meeting on December 18th. Our TAB meeting will be short that day, starting at, are we starting at 1? At noon? Oh, yeah, noon. We're starting at noon, but at 1:30, we're going to go over, adjourn and go over and work together as a large policymaker work group. All the TAB is invited, alternates are invited. The Met Council Transportation Committee members are invited to work on this next round of solicitation, which would be 2030. And so when we think about what we're trying to achieve as we've tried to work year over year on improving the regional solicitation evaluation process, we're now at the point where we're thinking about how are we going to align the allocation of the region's federal transportation funds through the regional solicitation project selection process to help achieve the goals, objectives, and policies of the 2050 TPP and Imagine 2050. And those 5 goals are equitable and inclusive, healthy and safe, dynamic and resilient, climate change, and natural systems. And so what we were talking about today was how to guide that discussion on the 18th of December. And our discussion today, which lasted a couple of hours, included an update on our base transportation solicitation structure, which is the modal focus sort of structure that we've been operating under, and the conversation around whether we should think about updating and improving the current modal focus structure, or we should change to a goal focus structure, which would be consistent with what we're talking about relative to the 2050 plan and the other goals of the Met Council. So the upshot of that entire conversation was that we thought we would ask the larger group to take a philosophical position on this and take a look at carefully whether it was worth thinking about changing the structure from a modal focus structure to a goal focus structure that would align with those 5 policy goals that we talked about, and whether all of those 5 policy goals are standalone goals, some may be subsumed into others, would be part of that conversation on the 18th of December. And I think we had a really rich and full conversation around the content of that, whether we should be thinking about improving with the model we have, or whether we should be thinking about changing to that goal-focused structure to allow us to concentrate, for example, more on safety, more on climate, more on dynamism and resilience, the economic development portion of it, for example. So I think this conversation on the 18th will be very valuable to the work group as we go about thinking about coming back to the TAB eventually and deciding together the pathway we want to follow for the 2030 solicitation that we're going to be working on. So that's I think, a brief summary of it. After much conversation, Commissioner Holberg did a really nice job, I thought, of saying, let's take it to the big group and ask them to look at this from a philosophical standpoint to see if we should be looking at changing to a goal-focused structure or not, and all of the attendant parts and elements of that would be involved. So that's our destination on the 18th, to have that broad conversation. I don't know if any of the members of the working group want to supplement those comments, but you're sure welcome to if you want to. Okay. I'll move on then to Glenn Johnson, who's part of our policymaker work group, but has also been chairing the active transportation work group, and he's going to report out on the activities in that group as well. Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Very short this month. We haven't met yet. We're meeting in early December, and really all we're doing now is information gathering to figure out exactly how counties are doing their financing, what's coming from potentially MnDOT side, and then what's happening with the regional solicitation overall. So we're a little more in a reactive state at this point, but hopefully we'll have things to report out either in December or in January.
All right, good. Does that prompt any questions for Chair Johnson? All right, then let's move on in our information portion of the agenda to the next portion of the agenda, which involves Minnesota greenhouse gas reduction strategies from a legislative standpoint. We've got Anna Pierce with us today, I believe, who's going to guide us through this portion of the conversation.
Hi, thank you, TAB members and the chair, for having me here today. Sorry, I've never been here, so I just clicked the button on the mouse. Okay, thank So I am Anna Pierce. I am with MnDOT's Office of Sustainability and Public Health, and I'm here as a second follow-up to the target setting discussion regarding our Minnesota greenhouse gas reduction legislation. So why this matters to you all, it is a requirement that we set a target for the Met Council 7-county area as defined by statute. And transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. And these targets really work towards our goals that are listed in the statewide multimodal transportation plan and the climate action framework, as well as the TPP. And then integrating these emissions reductions into our policy plans and programs are really going to help improve our transportation system and the health and well-being of our communities that they serve. So today I just wanted to share an update of how we are working through the approach options and how really that's how those targets would be assigned, the geographic scenarios that we're looking into, and then talking through some sample emission targets for the per capita approach. And then we're going to have a brief activity, and I believe it's on the back side of the packets that you all have. I will be collecting that at the end, so if you want to take notes at all during today's discussion, please don't write on that page because I will be taking it with me. And then just here to document any questions you all may have on the target setting process. So I will not be talking about the greenhouse gas and impact assessment procedure today or the technical advisory committee for the transportation impact assessment. I'm strictly focused on the target setting part of the greenhouse gas emissions that we were tasked with. So parts of the legislation, it is out of Minnesota Statute 174.01 subdivision 3. Really these targets have to be allocated on a 5-year or more frequent basis. So you'll see and hear me talk about that today. We are also, I mentioned, to allocate specifically to the metropolitan area a target. That's why I'm here in front of you all as well. And then the targets have to account for the differences in feasibility and the extent of emissions reduction across forms of land use and across regions of the state. So we'll talk about that. And then how we set these and what the approach is really can consider our DOT districts, geographic regions, per capita, calculations, and transportation mode, or any combination of these things. I believe you would have seen this the last time we were here, but this is the kind of what we've been talking about, closing the gap. When I say the gap, it really is the difference in that purple area there. Between the light blue line is the Minnesota Next Gen Energy Act targets combined with the statewide multimodal targets, and then the climate action framework targets. Then the dashed orange line is really where we're forecasting our emissions levels to be over the next 25 years. So you can see we are in a downward trend, which is great, based on the policies and electric vehicle adoptions and other changes that are happening around transportation, land use, that are reducing emissions, but we are not getting anywhere close to where that net zero is as a goal for 2050. So, and as you can see, the gap continues to widen the closer we get to 2050. We kind of taper off again. So how we close this gap, what the legislation is asking us to do is assign those emissions targets for different regions in the state. We're looking really primarily at 2 different approaches. It's that per capita, so based strictly on the number of people that live in a region, and that would be the forecasted amount in a given target year, versus the regional priorities plus. Or plus per capita. That is really looking at what priorities a specific geographic region says that they think they can advance more quickly or are willing to prioritize over maybe some others. And really what that is meant to do is potentially allow more context-sensitive application of these targets. When we look at geographic scenarios, we've really looked at 3 different scenarios so far. You can see all of them have the Met Council 7-county metro area because that is a statute-defined allocation that we must do. Really where we see the difference between these scenarios is between the greater Minnesota portion of the targets. And you can see they further divide out into more smaller regions of the state. So we have scenario 3 is really where we're looking at probably moving forward with and where we've received the most input that folks would like to have more accountability. Our other MPOs throughout the state, there are 7 other ones with urbanized areas. They would have individual targets, and then Greater Minnesota Area Transportation Partnerships. And those rural portions of our state have actually advocated for having more accountability and being able to see where they can program and plan for changes. So we have run the numbers on per capita, and really what that starts to look at, and I want to state this clearly, that this is an example of what one specific year may look like for a target. So looking at the 2035, this might be how we would break down if we're looking at per capita. So the forecasted portion of the Metropolitan Council's urbanized area, or the 7-county population, is projected to be about 55.2% of the state's population. The gap we're expecting around that time is about 8.42 million. So really, we take that 55.2%, multiply it by the 8.42 million, and we end up with 4.64 million tons of CO2 that would be allocated to the Met Council as their gap. Similarly, in 2050, we do the same process. The population has grown slightly as a portion of the state, but the gap, as I mentioned earlier, has grown and almost doubled by that point. So you can see there's a jump there in 2050 of about 9.1 million tons of CO2. So that's just some example of kind of what that per capita might start to look like. When we start looking at these regional priorities plus, what we've started to ask and look at and model is really some different geographies of the state and different levers. Each of these levers can either be modeled at a statewide, MPO level, or a county level. And they either have inputs of like a number value or a percentage of 0 to 100% changes. So these are all of the levers. I'm not going to list them off. They are all on your packet, and they are explained more in depth under each of these as well. So this next part is leading us into the activity here. So we have a number, and we've grouped them by transportation options, land use levers, fuels levers, and then we have other strategies. The other strategies have not been included in our model yet, as a lot of them are many statewide policies. There are a few that are more policies that can be done at regional levels. You can see there's actually only about 4 specific transportation besides some fuel transportation things. So when we are looking at greenhouse gas emissions reduction, we know that transportation cannot be the only impact. Land use has a significant impact on how we reduce our emissions from transportation, especially adjacent land uses, and how we plan and program our land use and zone it moving forward. So as we start to break these out, I'm changing color code, so I apologize. I didn't make sure this was ADA compliant, so I apologize on that. The levers crossed out here are those that are only able to be impacted by statewide decision making. So we've narrowed these levers then down to really what are regional levers. In this next part, we're going to go through, and I'm going to ask that you take these levers and think about them as what you feel would be for this 7-county geographic area. Which do you feel would be the easiest to increase and advance? Which do you feel are the hardest to advance? Which do you feel would reduce the most greenhouse gas emissions? And which are the highest priority for your regions? So start thinking about those as we talk through these next couple of things. There's also the continuum, I keep calling it the continuum of emissions reduction. So we have each of these levers, and individually, if we look at them on the continuum, some are going to have a lower emissions reduction per policy or implementation, and some are going to have a much more significant impact. But when we really start to combine these, they're going to exponentially. So it's not going to be like X plus Y equals Z. It's going to be X plus Y multiplier equals Z plus. So we start to see some of those changes as we move forward and put that. Yes. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
May I interrupt for a minute? So I have a question about this, the spectrum on the bottom of the potential impact on emissions reductions. So when I looked at this, I look at the levers, and each of those levers can be implemented at a higher or a lower level of intensity. So there's a range of impact, and so I'm wondering what sort of assumptions were made to come up with this array of where you placed something, because I looked at some of these options and I said, well, if some of these were implemented intensively, they would have significantly higher emissions reductions than others that may have been. So are you able to speak to those assumptions that went into sort of placing these levers along this array?
Yeah, thank you, Member Martinson. These are based on the inputs that would come out of our vision eval model that we're using to help calculate our emissions reduction potential. You're correct in that if we see, let's say, an advancement of 50% of transit revenue miles versus 10% is going to have a much different impact. But more generally speaking, certain levers on here, even at a low percentage of impact, are going to have a much higher percentage impact than some of those that are more on that low emissions reduction portion of the side. So there is a movement across the spectrum, but this is more of a generalized visual here of generally if you see increase of electric vehicle sales for household use, that's going to have a more immediate reduction versus reducing lane miles of freeways and arterials when we have looked at the model right now.
Okay, so there's no assumptions built in here about these things being implemented at sort of a mean level or something like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I'm curious about is when you look at increased zero emission or
Could you pull your microphone a little closer?
Electrical vehicle adoption, like we have a zero emissions bus plan. And are things like that, and I believe some of the other MPOs do as well. I know there's one for the suburban transit providers. Some of that is constrained not by any other forces than the site timing of when we can purchase buses to replace fleet and by when the electrical grid can catch up to us. And so that is one of our biggest constraints, and I'm curious how that is factored into this.
Thanks, Member Barbara. It's factored into the modeling process a little bit, but again, the model's pretty high level. It's more of a sketch model to get us a general idea of the impacts. It's a great question of how much that's going to impact. Really what that comes down to is more how we input the inputs to the model. So if you feel that you're not going to be able to make that shift to electric vehicles as quickly as you think because of those outside factors, we would expect to put as an input into the model for one of these levers a lower percentage or a lower input number.
Mr. Chair, has anyone reached out and worked with Metro Transit or the suburban providers with their zero emission bus plans to understand the timing of some of that and how it impacts the model?
We've been primarily coordinating with Met Council staff to hear what some of these levers may be. Right now, we've been working through the activities like this to focus our attention on what the top couple priorities would be for across the whole region, geographic region, not just the Met Council's transportation funding, for example. So that's part of the how we achieve the targets portion that we expect to move forward with after we get to setting these targets.
And so it's not just our funding. We actually legally have to run buses for so many miles and so many years before we can replace them. So there are other factors that are outside of our control that I feel like maybe our assumptions are in our control.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and I'll make sure to follow up on that, Chair.
Yes, Member Fahey.
Mr. Chair, Anna, and I'm a commissioner in Carver County. Anna, can you talk a little bit more about the connected rural growth, what that's going to do for land use and how that would impact townships and smaller communities with more roads, for example?
Yeah, so connected, I always screw up the name of it.
Let's go back to your prior slide, I think.
I know. How do I do that?
There you go.
Cool. So the plan for connected rural growth is really focused on how rural areas are going to plan for more density in housing and jobs. And so if there's going to be more dense housing and jobs, theoretically, there's less vehicle miles traveled between those jobs and their homes. So that's kind of part of what plays in there. But I am happy to have our modeler follow up with some of those more detailed.
Yeah, because, for example, Carver County is an exporter of people that leave the county on a daily basis to go to their jobs. And that's roughly about 40,000 people per day, and then 30,000 people come into Carver County to work at jobs. So that whole dynamic is going to be interesting to see as it grows.
So 2 slides before.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you, Member.
Member Barber, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair. So I would say one of the things that I have as concerns too, and I share this with Commissioner Fahey, that there is a lot of land in the outer counties that are within the metropolitan region that are agricultural lands. You can have rural centers that get dense, but there are still miles that have to be traveled, both for movement to and from those agricultural facilities, but also the freight traffic that goes from there to places like the ports of Savage.
I'll just follow up, just say that
Sure, go ahead.
the same way is that, observing what's going on here and what you presented in the 7-county metro area strategies will and should be different because of the different land and context and the use. So, we can't be one size fits all in the metro area.
Commissioner.
Just one question and maybe two, depending on the first answer. How are you using the results of this exercise?
So it's strictly an exercise. I'm not going to be holding anyone accountable. It's really meant to help us understand where the priorities are in the region at a very high level, so we can generally get an idea of where the emissions reduction potential may be. So I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides here. For example, we went to the TAC on November 6th, and the results were pretty varied, but I wanted to share this with you all to show you kind of how varied they were. And that once we went through the activity, really what came out from the tax perspective, and this is the kind of gut check compare, right? Is that the TAC identified that the priority levers were really shifting short trips to active transportation in the region and then increasing the density of walkable intersections in the community or in the communities. These are all going to be, as we look to reduce emissions, it's really going to need to be done at a city and county level in conjunction with what we're planning and doing at the Met Council and what we're planning and doing at MnDOT. This is not like hey, we're washing our hands of this situation. We're planning to be partners and working through how we move forward with this. But what we're trying to do is get a good idea of what these levers would be the priority, and so that we can start to fill out and start to understand what the potential regional priorities may have an impact on for emissions reduction if we went more that regional priority route. And then what the gap would still be if those priorities don't meet where we need to be for emissions reduction in any given target year.
So in doing this activity, each of us represent vastly different numbers of people or cities or, I don't know how many people are in Hennepin County. You get the same as,
I get it. Then it's varied and it's different.
And about over half of the members of this board are appointed by state agencies or the Met Council. And so are you asking us to, first of all, from my perspective, there's only a couple of these that I could circle no matter what your answer is. But are you asking us to constrain our answers to those types of things that we in our realm or circle, in other words, counties don't do land use, we don't expand transit service. So are we supposed to stay to our lane or our bucket? Yeah. And then I think it also would be helpful when you do this is that I think there's going to be a fair number of applications that aren't going to have anywhere near 10 answers. So you might want to show a range of the applicants, how many picked 1 or 2, and how many actually picked 10, because I think it's going to further skew these results to make this almost meaningless in being able to extrapolate anything from it.
Thank you, Member Hallberg. Great points. Essentially, what I plan to do and what I've done with the other MPOs throughout the state and at the TAC is ask just generally, think about your constituents, the area that you work in, your friends down the street. What are the priorities, and as well as the policy priorities for the area? What may be things that are priorities that are identified in your CIPs, in your planning documents? What are some of the priorities in the TPP? What are things that you think that the funding is going to in your area, as in the 7-county geographic area, holistically? I would think of it that way. And I'm not going to be waiting if only 1 or 2 were circled. I would say I'm just like cumulatively seeing where things fall and kind of what the priority is. So what I would ask is just if you are able to and willing to fill out or circle like your top 5 to 10 in the next couple of minutes, and then we're gonna prioritize those 5 to 10 on like your top 1, 2, or 3 with an asterisk. Yes, Member Schreiber.
Member Schreiber. Are you done, Commissioner? Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking at these and I'm struggling with them a little bit because more than 3/4 of them are basically intended to raise the cost of using a vehicle. And that might be a good goal, but underlying that of raising the cost of using a vehicle, whether it's parking or taxes or fees or miles-based, is basically raising the cost of using a vehicle so that you lower the demand for vehicles. And I think you got to look at it the other way as well. And there isn't enough in here that I could circle that would say, cause me to think I'm going to increase the supply of more carbon neutral or carbon beneficial modes of transportation. You've got a few walks, a few, crossing lanes, et cetera. The problem I have with raising all these costs is it's insidious. It leaks into the economy, and we raise these costs, and we end up killing the economy. And that, you want me to circle these things, I think it's just the wrong way to go about it, is raising the cost with the assumption that you're going to lower the demand.
I'd like to follow up on that. Thank
sure.
you, Mr. Chair. It also is a huge equity issue. There's a
Yes.
lot of people who are working 3 and 4 jobs and have to have a car, especially when they live down out in Dakota County. I know, I've heard you talk about it a lot, and they can't get anywhere. And you start putting these costs on them, you're pushing them out, of being able to afford to even have a job.
So I don't want to take the floor too long, but for example, increasing miles of transit that might make sense, okay? But I don't see on here lowering the cost of transit. Take transit to 0 so that you have more demand for transit. It's not an option here. And I'm not saying that's the right answer either. I'm just saying it seems like a skewed grouping here that's just not appropriate for this discussion.
Thank you, members. I think those are great points, and I think those, part of this, we have to be thinking about how this connects with the land use levers here as well. Increasing transit, if it's not connected to housing or jobs, is not going to make a difference, right? I think your point about transit costs make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, these are the levers that plug into the model. The model takes into consideration, I know it's modeling. So it sketches high level of, and it pulls in the census data. It looks at housing amounts. It looks at costs of travel, other elements that are pulled into the model already as inputs. And then these levers or inputs then kind of play on into those as well. So I think those are great points, and those are ways in which we encourage more people, right? I think the $2 ride fare, that's a great point that it's getting lowered. That's going to get more people on. That's going to increase those revenue miles, right? So those are more that how we get those levers to get to those values that we're striving for in these next few years. So I think those are great points.
Thank you for taking the challenge.
Yeah.
Member Foster and then Member Geisler.
Thank you. I appreciate what you said, Member Schember. I think it's not just about increasing the miles available for transit. Sorry, I'm looking at a different screen than that. But I think it's also somewhere in here something about how transit is used. It's like expanding the number of trips that are faster and more efficient. So it's like expanding our entire transit system so that it's not just your bus comes at 7:53 and 8:03 or 8:23, but transit is just there every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes. I don't know how that gets, or if that can be one of the like how that becomes one of the levers. But I think that is the kind of sort of exchange that we need from, if we're going to put systems in place that are pushing people out of their cars, then it can't just be expansion of transit miles. It needs to be expansion of the frequency of the system.
Thank you, Member Foster. I do want to note that the model is constrained by certain things, and it's sketch, it's high level. It's trying to get us a good idea. And so revenue miles is more that proxy for a lot of what both of you have been talking about here. I wholeheartedly agree that you cannot get those revenue miles up or those increases without exactly what both of you have been discussing as well. So this activity is really meant as an activity to just make you start thinking about these different ways in which we can be reducing emissions, and that these impact how we reduce emissions, right? So I want to just reiterate, I'm not holding anyone to any specific thing. Feel free to not write your name on it. I actually would encourage you not to. But it's really meant for us to get to, like I said, filling out this, being able to put the inputs into the model, getting more information from Met Council staff on what the priority inputs actually would be for the geographic region so that we can plug this in and really see what the potential is, because then we would be able to compare these two different approaches, right? The regional priorities approach and the per capita approach, and decide which one is going to lead and how we set these targets. That's really what we're getting to. We're asking for input so that we can figure out if regional priorities is worth our time going through, or if it basically is a wash between if we break it out by per capita. So that's what we're trying to do here, is to show some example, kind of show our work, figure out, okay, does this make sense to go with this priority approach of regional priorities or that per capita approach to set these targets. And then the intent here is that we will be reporting these out and sharing, asking with a super brief survey, here's the per capita, what it would look like in 2035. Here's what the targets would look like in 2050. I know I've used both those target years, but the targets will be set 5-year increments. But as example years of here's per capita, here's regional priorities. Now tell us what your preference is. And we'll be asking, what region are you a part of? The Met Council 7-county area. You check that box. Which priorities, check this one or that one for the approach, and then any comments you have. And then the fourth question will really come out of what can we do to help you to implement and to achieve these targets? So the things that all of you, Chair and members, have stated today are things that we can do at MnDOT to help you as partners figure out policies, resources, educational materials. A lot of this is educating folks on what it is to reduce emissions, what are the impact of the levers we have that are transportation related, land use related, fuels related, because none of this can be achieved or even close to achieved if we don't work with all of those levers. So unfortunately, we have a very tight timeline here that the commissioner is required by statute to set these by February 1st. So that's why I'm coming to you all today, just asking for some of that input of where you see some of these levers as being priorities, so we can get the inputs to put into the model, to give you the comparison, so you have a more informed potential options for setting these targets.
Member Geisler, then Member Barber. And then have you been keeping the list here? Yeah, and you forgot Member Jenkins was in there.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Member Jepson.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
And
Member Karwoski.
Oh, boy.
I want to recognize, I understand limitations of modeling is hard, so don't take that as this, but there's a whole lot of stick on this list, to Member Shember's point, not a whole lot of carrot. That makes it really hard to talk about some of this. One of the things that I think is missing, though, is why do we use transportation? And it's to go from a place to a place. We could talk about mixed-use living is really the only thing that kind of even gets there, but how about getting people to live nearer to the places where they need to be, so they have less of a need for that? That's a land use consideration, but that's a city thing. But if people don't have to get in their car to go to or take transit or whatever, because they're closer to that is a land use consideration that I just don't really feel is listed on here, but that is, especially for growing communities, a consideration, a way to limit the growth of carbon emissions, because you didn't make 50, 60, 70, 100 acres of residential that is 3 miles away from your commercial hub.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that one out. And I think overall, though, the other thing that's missing here is just the entire concept of remote work is shifting again. And that is based a lot on employers within the region here. And if people are pushing towards return to work or reducing, that will increase transportation needs. So that is the government and businesses needing to decide how they're going to do things, and businesses are going to drive their business the way they want. If people are required to go to work, they will get to work. A lot of people changed where they live in the last, let's call it 5 years or so. That has definitely impacted our transportation use. We see it on the bus schedules now and what's happening on transit, and the AM PM peak is gone, but to some extent, but that isn't on here. How are we, that is a creative and different way. If you completely eliminate the need for the trip at all, that solves, that's VMT and GHG all together. So I think there's more than what's here. Understanding the limitation of modeling, just wanted to make the point.
Thank you, Member Gessler. And just to respond to some of those, increasing the density of walkable intersections in a community really looks at those some of those short trips and making sure that land use decisions are made in that you could walk. You could safely and comfortably walk to and from the places that you need to go. And then that shift to short trips to active transportation. The short trips are really defined by less trips, less than 20 miles round trip. So I think that, again, is getting a little bit more at what you're talking about. Some of that more connected development. And then we also see increased, number 20 on the list is increased travel demand management strategies. And those can look like telecommuting. It can look like commuter programs. I know Metro Transit has a van, sorry, I live in Moorhead, Minnesota. So
Van pool.
Yeah, the van pool. That's another way in which we can coordinate and partner with cities and counties and us as Met Council or MnDOT can really encourage some of these employer programs or subsidizing them as an employer to encourage your employee to take some of these things. So I think there are ways in which we can encourage and provide opportunities to do exactly what you're saying, Member, but it's how we move forward with that, and I think some of those resources are yet to be developed and fleshed out.
Member Barber, then Member Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and a question, and so just want to, for my comment, it's not towards this work, it's towards the overall process and something I've kind of feared about this all along. And when this process was started, The way for allocations to, for it to meet, address the gap, it would be pushed towards the urban and to transit and to some of those things, instead of the other areas of the metropolitan region or greater Minnesota. Some of that hasn't been appeased here, where it feels like, well, you can go buy some extra electric buses or add a couple of other routes, and that's what's gonna fix some of this. And so I have some great nervousness about this. And this is prior to this has been a kind of an existing thing that, that would be the ultimate solution is Metro Transit can just add another bus route. And that's not the solution. So, but some of the questions here do have that feel to it, or towards punishing the person, to Member Schwamber's comments. And so I have concerns in general how that's going to be out there. So that's my comment. My question is, we know there's a short timeline. Allocation numbers have to go to the legislature in February 1st. Will we see those numbers beforehand in time that there can be comment on them?
She's got 2 pair of glasses on.
It depends. That's probably the best answer I can give, is it depends. Technically, the commissioner sets these targets. We're doing our best to do our outreach here. The intent is that we will come back to the committee of the whole either in December or January to provide a more complete, these are what the targets are, and for any comments on those at that time. So that would be before that February 1st deadline. Whether it's December or January is what is more like, it depends when. More.
It's a hard time to your schedule us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Member Jenkins.
So I also have a comment and a question. My comment is, so far, what I think we've seen is we're dealing with a limited set of options, which by model means your results are going to be flawed. My question is this: would this process invite the expansion of our feedback, which you're looking for, to include other options? I know your model probably doesn't, but would the commission, whatever group, actually want to hear from the transit-minded folks, transportation-minded folks, actual feedback on other options that should be considered?
Absolutely. Thank you, Member Jenkins. Absolutely. We want to hear how you think we're going to be able to achieve these. I think that's where we start moving into that implementation side of the target setting. Is right now, the legislation does not provide us, I know you mentioned a lot of sticks. We don't have a lot of sticks. We don't have a lot of carrots. We have actually no sticks or carrots per the legislation. But we were just tasked to set these targets, right? We're to sub-allocate out that gap amount that's been identified. So how we actually achieve those targets and what that means, if there's any implications if you don't achieve your target, that's still really to be determined. So if you do have input on how we go about achieving the targets, I would greatly appreciate that. That's really going to help the next year of us moving forward and working with staff and throughout cities and counties throughout the entire state to figure out really how we achieve the emissions reduction targets that we're setting. I don't want these to be empty targets. I want them to be feasible. That's what the legislation has tasked us to do. So that's really what we're doing right now, is trying to make sure that they are the most feasible as we can in the limited time that we have to determine what the targets are. Again, the targets, once we set them, we can update them. So I don't want us to get a loss on that. The targets are a value. We should be striving towards emissions reduction. How that looks and how we achieve the reduction is really going to vary across the regions of the state. I think Member Barber's comment about let's rely on transit, we are having totally different conversations in rural Minnesota, because transit is not a reliable, that's not a great word. It's not a viable option to reduce emissions. There are other things such as trip chaining and shifting to zero emission fuels and those types of things, as well as land use development patterns and things like that we can lean more on versus in some of our more urban areas throughout the state. Transit is an option because there is federal funding that comes in. There is state funding that comes in to support those things, but that shouldn't be the only option or how we achieve this. So I think any comments you have on how we achieve would be very helpful as we move into the next phase. But I want to be very cognizant of everyone's time here today, so I don't want to go over.
For sure.
Follow on?
Just for follow-up?
Go ahead, yeah.
So I don't want to assume, but we do have your email address on the last side. May we use that?
Absolutely. Oh, dear.
All righty.
No, yes, yes, absolutely. Please do, please reach out. We do have a website. We are trying to update that too with more updated information as well. But please reach out if you have questions or comments or additional thoughts, things that you weren't able to catch today. I know Member Johnson has utilized my email already a couple of times, and so has Member Martinson. So please reach out. I'm happy to discuss this further. And as we move into the implementation side, happy to discuss this with you all, especially on the local perspective of how at city and county level we start to move this forward.
All right, we got a few more questions for you,
Oh, yeah.
Anna. Hold on, Member Morast and then Mayor Winchell. Oh, no, Brian, you're down the list. Sorry.
Not yet?
Yeah, not yet. Mayor Winchell and then Commissioner Jepson.
Mine did kind of get asked, but a lot of these things on here don't seem like they're really in our control. Like the one that really got my eye, increase electric vehicle sales. Well, am I missing something there? How do we do that? And then the follow-up, you seem to really be in a hurry about getting this information. If only a little bit of the information is circled or whatever, isn't that gonna really skew what you're sending forward? And I know Commissioner Jenkins kind of asked the same thing, but it just seems odd that we're hurry up and get this done, but it's not really good information we're giving you. So that's just my comment.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jepson and then Commissioner Karwoski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I really don't want to repeat many of the comments of my colleagues here that I absolutely do agree with. I do think at the base of this is land use. I think it does a really disservice, and I feel like I've mentioned this a number of times in these meetings, that the 7-county metro, yes, it's a region, but it's a very different region wherever you go. And I don't think it's wise to put targets, to put goals on the region as a whole, because like Member Gattell, you mentioned, it's an equity issue. It's an equity issue. We don't have transit in Anoka County. We have some transit, excuse me. We just had a presentation from Network Now that they are cutting our transit routes in half, discontinuing them. So even though Network Now has an increase of 35% transit, Anoka County's was cut 50%. It doesn't exist. So how we can relate to downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul that does have the land use for people to walk, our lands were not developed with that convenience in mind. So our responses to greenhouse gas reduction also has to be have a different lens of how we can reduce this. So also with greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, I think there has to be a consideration for how our lands are used and what makes the most sense to how we can then change things. The other topic that you hit on was creating targets, and those targets can always change. My concern about filling this information is the collective you is going to see the responses and say like, well, we got a majority of people that want new transit lines, so that's going to be one of our targets. Well, no, not necessarily. I don't want this to be a decision-making opportunity to get something on paper that you can then change at a later date. That really makes me concerned.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Karwoski, and then Member Vaughn, then Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with so many, virtually all the comments made. So, I think really, I'm a Washington County Commissioner. There isn't many of these that I can really fill out. I think it's worth, this is a very diverse board of different interests. I think it's worth stepping back, not even, I think the data we're going to provide you is not going to be useful. It's going to be inaccurate and misleading. So I really think you should step back with the survey, call on, whether other groups outside TAB, but call on people. As an example, us suburban counties, you could customize questions with a little research that would be more pertinent than the feedback you're looking. And in our largely urban areas, you could consult with them. I think you almost need some different survey options. The questions just aren't helpful. Here's one example, and I think Commissioner Fahey brought it up. The transportation option, expand miles of transit service. I really like the aspect of let's expand the use of the transit we have. I mean, there's just so, every one of these categories you could change. I think it's worth us not even participating in this survey and collection of data. I think it's going to be accurate. I'd say step back and try to, you got a lot of feedback to make a more meaningful, pertinent data collection. So
You can always put none on your page.
So,
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And then Member Vaughn. Yeah, thanks. Pull that close, please.
Yeah. Is that good?
Pretty good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anna, for your work on this and bringing it to us and getting our inputs. I just have one comment to share and then a question for you. My comment is that I think I'm feeling a lot of different urgencies here. I feel that urgency of folks whose costs and the difficulty of living can potentially go up through some of these things. I also feel the urgency of having 2 6-year-olds at home. And in the year 2050, they'll turn 32. They'll be entering their prime working years, starting family years. And in the year 2100, they'll be 82 years old if they're still living. And for me, as their parent, I kind of figure like I can ride it out with the climate that we've got. Things are getting tougher. The wildfire smoke has been coming in more and more, it seems like, through the years. I figure I'm probably going to be able to ride it out. But I feel the urgency of the world that we're leaving behind for my children, for the children that they have in the future. And so I just want to urge our board to think of this urgency alongside some of the more kind of short and medium term things we think about. And then my question is just, are there other metropolitan regions and planning organizations in the US, in North America, or in kind of places that maybe have a comparable range of land uses to the 7-county area that have been able to show some sustained reductions? And are there things that we can learn from their process? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Member Vaughn, and thank you for bringing that comment to the forefront. I too am a parent. I have a 6.5, 4.5, and a 1-year-old. So those are very, very real things about the work that we do. And I think a lot of the comments that have been made today, I would encourage us to think how our existing land use and transportation decisions have impacted the world that we're currently in, and what changes we can make to impact the future of our emissions and the world that we're going to live in. As far as regions we can look to, the Oregon DOT has and Portland has developed and actually used the current model actually since 2016. I'm like, what year? They've been using this vision eval model and these levers and adjusting. And so we've actually, that's part of the reason we leaned on that model to help us kind of make some of these target decisions. As well as Colorado DOT has set similar targets and gone through a process similar to set a rural statewide target and then MPO-specific targets. So we are working with those DOTs to learn from them and take the good things, leave the bad things, and trying to make sure we make the best decisions we can with the information provided to us. And that's why we've asked for some of these inputs on where you think the priorities are moving forward. What are the levers, the priority levers that we can kind of pull on more hard and think we can make these decisions. I also think our state is really great at showing the diversity of rural versus urbanized areas. We have a lot of rural areas in our state. About 27% of our population is in rural areas of Minnesota. You saw that about 52% of the population is in the Twin Cities metro area here, but then another 23% is in the other urban populations throughout Minnesota. So those are the other 7 MPO urbanized areas. So I'd say leaning on some of them as well as what are they doing in some of the less large urbanized metro areas, and where those blend in with some of the more rural areas, I think are very reflective of some of our more rural suburban transitions we have in the Twin Cities metro as well. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner McGuire and then Member Martinson.
Wow. Well, thank you, Anna, for this information and this thoughtful discussion that you're prompting here. I'm as torn and as concerned as many as my colleagues are about this process and what this will say about what we're trying to fill out. But I understand that you need to get this done by the legislative session. So you're in a bind because you need to present some data, and they're required to do that. So you're asking us, and you need to get input from people. So here you are getting input from us. And so we all do this. We all need to get public input. So I'm trying to think of how we can provide you the best input that you need, because you got to give something to the legislature, and I want to make sure that you can get the best information. I'm not sure. I mean, when I see these levers, I say, here's what I think someone should do. Like, we can't do many of these. Yeah, so it's like, what would we like to see done in our area? You know, what would we like someone to do if it's not us? So I could maybe circle some for that, not that I could be responsible. I'm frustrated because we just had a whole 2.5-hour workshop on transportation yesterday in my county. We didn't even talk about this kind of thing. Like, it would have been fun. It would have been good. Like, do my public works people, have they talked about this? Has this been brought to anybody, or is this now my responsibility to bring this to them? I mean, I actually want to help. We all at this table want to help you get the data that you need to help with this, and I'm struggling with what that looks like at this point, because it's November and the session is coming up. So I'm just sort of outlining where I'm frustrated about how do I get you information that's going to be helpful for us and for you in this process. So I'm just putting it out there again, because I think we've all been articulating the frustration we're having with kind of what's before us, and appreciating the work that you've done. But how can we be helpful from now on at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Member McGuire. I think those are the great points. I would say the most helpful way would be either if you feel you want to send me an email following this meeting saying, you know what, I think we would like to see in our area this type of change. I can decipher that into what the levers actually mean and what would get us there. That might be the most helpful way. I know I can take a lot of the comments that I've heard today about what some of those changes may be, but if you have others that weren't maybe voiced or you want to emphasize, that would be helpful. So if you don't see it in the form of the lever as shown on the activity or in the packet here, feel free to email me, because it may not be clear through these levers where that might fit. But I can work with our modeler to figure out kind of what that looks like and where that coalesces around.
Member Martinson.
Thank you, Chair. I have several points I want to make, actually. And one, I want to say thank you for the work you're doing. And having done model building in the past in the public health arena, it's often a years-long exercise. So I have great sympathy for what you're being asked to do here. And I'd like to remind everybody at the table that the alternative to the levers that are being presented here, they're not perfect. You can't build a model with inputs that you don't have and you can't measure. The other thing is these levers represent potential capacity that there exists to reduce greenhouse gas. That's what they're here to reflect. Land use is in there. You can upzone your cities and increase options for mixed-use living. You can upzone your cities and increase options for multifamily housing. You can do it like St. Paul did, and you can change how we define families so that you allow larger household sizes in your city. Those are all land use decisions that can be made. The alternative to these things is to just have the greenhouse gas allocations done on a per capita basis. And let me tell you what's going to happen if that happens. The Met here is going to get way more than if we do this where we look at we've got capacity to reduce. So this is supposed to be an exercise that gets us a little bit closer to a reality, to get a more appropriate allocation of the greenhouse gases. Every model is wrong, some are useful, right? So is it right? Absolutely not. Is it perfect? Never will be. And especially on the timeline they're working on. So Connie, if you're listening, I know you'll find it very hard for me to say this, but I am looking for grace for MnDOT in this work because I think what they're being asked to do is damn near impossible. Last point. To the point about the insidiousness of cost increases for driving vehicles. What's really insidious is that driving vehicles is the most highly subsidized activity that we engage in this country. And those subsidies exist in so many places, in so many ways, and they are so embedded in our society that we don't even see them. That's the definition of insidious. So, thanks.
Thanks, Member Martinson. I thought you said it well there, that all of the things that we were concerned about relative to this questionnaire, you succinctly helped us out, I think, and helped MnDOT out in the process. It's an unenviable position I think you're in as I listen to everybody discuss their concerns. This notion of how you go about developing a statewide greenhouse gas reduction strategy that is compatible with maintaining economic growth in a state is that is one tough proposition. So even if this is a little bit helpful, it would be beneficial to you and probably beneficial to all of us. I'll say from the fuel standpoint, we just got a grant in Edina for a federal grant to convert some of our heavy equipment over to biofuels. It's going to reduce greenhouse gas production by 90%. With those vehicles. So I don't see that on the list for fuels. So think about biofuels. And then I'm going to go give Commissioner Holberg the last word.
Well, just real briefly, and I'm not going to argue with Brian, but the timeline of this is obscene.
Yeah.
I serve on the working group for the Vehicle Mile Reduction Working Group, and other states that have embarked on these kinds of standards, mandates, and modeling have taken 3, 4, 5 years to do it. And this is so wrong on so many levels. It's a result of having the trifecta. There was no yin to the yang when they put it in. They could do it. They wanted to get it done, right? Because they had the votes to do it. And it would serve the whole state a whole lot better if it was done right rather than fast. There's no doubt that there will be changes or attempts to change this in the upcoming legislative session. But even if you buy into all this, it's unfair to MnDOT. Virtually every organization from county engineers on down have part of their legislative platform to whoa doggy, slow down. We need to do this right, not fast. So, I mean, I agree, but I'm not going to give them bad input. I'm not doing it. And this whole thing, if you don't bring the people along with you, it's not going to matter. It's more, in my mind, the biggest bang for reducing carbon reduction is to start having conversations with the skeptics, the disbelievers, and the hostiles, which they probably, they're the majority in the city I come from, right? They see no value. Very few see much value in any of this at all. So we kind of got to work our way to just in public sentiment, and that takes time as well in order for it to be effective. You're not going to have electeds put in high-density housing and land use when 80% of their constituents don't want it.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. So you'll have to go tell Commissioner Daubenberger she's just going to have to go to the legislature and fall on her sword.
We could write a letter. The TAB could write a letter to the governor and the head of and said, you wanted us to do this exercise. It would be a lot more meaningful if
Do it
MinDOT
right.
had more time to do this and we could provide meaningful input.
Absolutely, more
Instead of an
conversations.
activity
Yeah.
that has very little
Use a model
value.
that works for
Folks,
us, not this
folks
outdated
comfortable with
one.
that general idea that we author up a letter to the governor and the legislature saying, do it right?
Yes.
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 Okay, let's do that. Let's figure that out.
I'll
how we
make a
wanna craft
motion.
Well, it's not on the agenda. Maybe they can bring it back for.
that. Yeah.
A draft
we'll
letter
do
on
some-
our
We'll do
December
some
meeting.
drafting and then we won't have a letter that reflects 34 inputs but we'll get it, we'll try to circulate it.
Still on our paperwork?
Okay.
I'll collect. Wrote none, that's fine too. I just want to say thank you very much, Chair and members, for your valuable input. It is really helpful to hear and understand where each of you are coming from throughout this process, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, really? I don't.
Okay, good.
You got
appreciate all your work.
you can drive back to Moorhead 3.5 hours and think about it all the way in the car.
I almost didn't make it because of the snow, so.
Oh, wow.
But
Well, we appreciate
thank
all
you
your
all
start.
for having me.
You want our paperwork?
Yes, if you want to share your paperwork, I'm happy to
I
take
have
it.
comments on that. The comments, so. That's good. Pass it in. Pass it in so that they get it.
I'm bringing mine to my county. Saying, what are we doing about it?
I get pictures of
Pass it
mine.
down. I feel like we're back in school.
All right, folks, we got one more item to cover quickly. We got Jed's been patiently waiting back there to give us a quick update on the TPP public comments. That's going to be an action item we see again in January. We're incorporating some of the comments, but he just wants to make us aware of those comments right now. Welcome, Mr. Hanson.
We're going to skip through a few slides here that are providing background. So our intent here today is to check our understanding with what we heard and to make sure that the major themes I'm surfacing here are consistent with what were raised in various agency comments that were provided. To preview some of the anticipated changes that we're planning to bring forward in a revised draft for this body to consider recommending for adoption, and to provide an opportunity for additional policymaker feedback or to raise any issues for further discussion. I will first cover the topics that we heard and then the proposed changes. So we received just shy of 400 transportation comments that were left either on the transportation policy plan or the Imagine 2050 plan overall. One of the benefits of running on this coordinated schedule this time is we were able to share the comment period with all of the regional system plans, and those comment areas that touch multiple areas coordinate for combined responses in our plans. Through our engaged.metrocouncil.org platform, we had about 100 commenters provide Likert ratings on the importance of plan objectives and provide some rank ordering of their underlying policies. It's non-random and it's not regionally or demographically representative, but we did hear pretty broad support for the goal areas of healthy and safe and natural systems, and most of the areas under equitable, inclusive, and dynamic and resilience. The majority of the feedback in the other areas were still overwhelmingly supportive, but there was a higher amount of somewhat unimportant or not important ratings of the climate change objectives, and then some specific objectives related to highway reliability and racial equity. We'll provide a more detailed report with the comments themselves, data and findings ahead of adoption. Overall, I'll cover some general themes first and then modal-specific themes. On climate and environment, we heard support for objectives, policies, and actions related to VMT reduction, GHG reduction, and electrification. But we heard some of the concerns that were discussed here today about the application of climate actions across the region with diverse land uses and transportation needs. On asset management, we heard a concern about lack of a specific objective on maintenance and modernization activities. We heard concern about the lack of an increased revenue scenario and some desire for more description of unmet investment needs that remain after the recent federal and state investments. We received diverging feedback on the plan's multimodal investment tone. Some commenters were supportive of multimodal considerations being integrated throughout the plan, while others raised concern that it overemphasizes non-highway transportation. We also heard a variety of perspectives on issues like disinvestment, environmental justice, reparative investments, and geographic distribution of funding. These distribution of benefits conversations are quite common here, and we'd anticipate those conversations would continue through the solicitation evaluation. Transit was the area that probably received the most modal-specific comments. We heard perspectives on transitway development and governance, and a handful of transit advocates asked for the council to take a stronger role in updating the regional transit vision. We heard support or opposition for specific transit expansion or corridor modal and station area preferences, requests for additional related study, and some non-agency comments that asked for more investment in regional and intercity transit options. We heard a desire for regional discussion on the unallocated portion of the sales tax revenue, a variety of perspectives on transit coverage and use and how we coordinate services and experience across the region. And of course, the importance of the issue of safety and security on transit remains very clear and shared across the region. That theme of safety carries into the roadway and highway themes. Safety was a very clear top priority shared by many commenters. Highway mobility had a diverse variety of perspectives on it, with support for mobility investments, citing their economic needs like freight and population growth, and also opposition to those investments, and support for reparative investments to address ongoing environmental justice harms and climate impacts. There were differing viewpoints that the plan either overemphasizes or underemphasizes the impacts of highway investments, and differing viewpoints on the efficacy of highway mobility investments on improving travel time reliability and reducing congestion. Continuing on that theme, there's a highway delay specific objective in the plan, and we heard either specific support or opposition to that objective. And on multimodal coordination, there was general support for coordinating those multimodal investments with our highway investments. For pedestrian and bicycle themes, we heard feedback about the regional bicycle transportation network, including support for updating its criteria, coverage, tiering, and the regional destinations. Some additional engagement with parks agencies was requested, and comments regarding the sensitivity of the bicycling network needs by varying regional geography and land use. We heard support for barrier removal across pedestrian and bicycle systems, and support for investments to reduce pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries throughout the region, and some specific clarifications related to this work. We also heard some questions about new policies that seek to increase ADA compliance or promote universal design. Some other themes. On finance, we heard that there was limited discussion in the differences in revenue availability between city and county governments, differing perspectives on how freight user needs can conflict with safety and environmental justice needs, freight transfer and delivery, so things like intermodal facilities and e-commerce were brought up, and tribal engagement in American Indian cultural resources. The Met Council's American Indian Advisory Council requested that the plan provide guidance on engagement best practices and identify implementing actions so the system can better support and serve cultural resources. We received comments on aviation and land use compatibility, various suggested changes to our performance measurement program, and requests for additional engagement related to the scoping and then carrying out of our work program tasks, and a number of very well received and sympathetic comments related to the plan length, its readability, and its format. Okay. So how do we propose to address those changes? So this isn't comprehensive and it doesn't cover all of those themes that I just discussed, and it does not cover all of the comments that we received, but these are the high-level things you should expect to change. Removal of the Riverview corridor in response to changes in that project, and related map and narrative changes to demonstrate continued regional investment on the corridor. Discussion of the recently announced Gold Line extension, change to to broaden regional level study of future transitways, a clarification to that excessive delay objective to clarify its intent, and the addition of some highway spot mobility projects. There'd be some corrections to the critical urban freight corridors map and consideration of changes to regional bicycle transportation network destinations and tierings, consideration of changes to some health actions to address research needs, and clarification of work program tasks. We'll also add some additional narrative and data on access to destinations from the University of Minnesota's Accessibility Observatory that was not available at time of publication, and then a number of other minor changes that respond to specific comments and corrections. Before we get to discussion, I just want to run to the plan timeline here to highlight where we are. So through the end of this year, we're working on tasks to finalize the plan content in response to these comments. We don't have a revised plan to share with you today because we're still making those changes. However, we are planning to post with the December 9th Transportation Committee and December 11th TAB agendas copies of as much of the red line content as we can. For your review, we don't anticipate presenting it, but it would be on your agenda so you can have a look at it before you're asked to consider it in January. So those discussion questions that I raised at the beginning, just looking to confirm if we've accurately captured those major regional themes and if there's additional feedback.
All right, questions for Mr. Hansen? Comments? Yeah, Member Johnson.
Thank you for this. I mean, again, I think none of us have the ability to read through all of these chapters to pull it all together. So, it's good to have these summaries. I've just been noticing right now that there are a lot of different other agencies, cities, city plans that are commenting on, we're using TPP 2040, but of course 2050 is really imminent. So what's the exact timeline for when 2050 will be done, in effect, and now it could be used by these different agencies? I saw this in terms of like MnDOT with some of their upcoming projects.
Yes, so there's a formal timeline that's in state statute, how our regional system plans interact with local comprehensive plans and other local plans. So the regional development guide and our transportation, wastewater, et cetera, system plans get updated in the 3-year period following the results of the latest decennial census. We have to provide updated system statements, which are developed off of the content of these updated system plans that you'll be considering in January, and the council will be considering in February. We're required to provide those system statements by December 31st of this coming year to local governments so they can update their comprehensive plans based off of this new level of regional policy. And then I believe they have 3 years from there to adopt a comprehensive plan that we would then review for system conformance. So this chart here is the cycle that this follows.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions, comments? All right. Thank you. Good. All right. Any items of TAB members for the agenda? Mayor.
Just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Hope all your blessings come true.
Yeah, good thought. It's thinking the same thing. Everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, one of the great holidays of the year.
Yeah.
And we will see you all in mid-December. Stand adjourned.
God willing.